Hey, good afternoon. This is Jeff Farris, and I've got Derik Belair and Ali Mahmoud with us today to talk about SaaS in the MSP space. Welcome everybody to attend. SaaS is a fascinating topic for CloudRadial for me personally. It's something that was on our roadmap from day one of development. On how we address that and how we get that information off to clients. And for a variety of different reasons, we'll talk about during this webinar, we weren't able to get that done in release one, but want to be sure and cover that today for CloudRadial, so you understand where it fits in the CloudRadial perspective, but also more importantly fits in the MSP perspective and how important it is for working with clients. For those that are not familiar with CloudRadial, and I can't believe there's still a couple out there that aren't, but for those that aren't, CloudRadial is that SaaS solution that basically gives you a home where you work with your clients. I mean, if I can describe CloudRadial as simply the place you live with clients, that basically encompasses the things that we try to do with the product, from ticketing to QBRs to reporting. Basically trying to build a place where you proactively work with clients to address their needs and for them to understand what you do for them. So that's our mission in life. And I'd like to now talk about Augmentt. Derik, you want to give a quick plug for Augmentt?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks everybody for joining us. As Jeff pointed out, my name is Derik Belair, and I'm the CEO here at Augmentt. A fellow by the name of Gavin Garbett and I started Augmentt back in 2020, I should say, not 2000, 2020. And the goal was really around helping MSPs capitalize, manage, and secure this whole sort of SaaS phenomenon that's been happening, for quite a long time now, right? Gavin and I started a business called Enable back in 2000. And for those of you that may or may not be familiar, Enable focus was all about building RMM, remote monitoring and management, to help the channel capitalize on services and really drive that reoccurring managed services. When we started Augmentt, the genesis and the idea was very much the same. It was really all about helping MSPs capitalize on SaaS, a phenomenon that is and was happening at their customer level. And we saw unique opportunities for MSPs to be able to start to give that visibility of what is being used when it comes to SaaS, what are the applications in use, how do you secure it, how do you manage it, and so on. So it's built from the ground up for the MSPs. So we're talking multi-tenanted, we're talking highly secure on the back end. And as Jeff pointed out, it's really all about helping all of you really get that visibility when it comes to SaaS. So instead of SaaS being something that is happening at the customer level and you may or may not be involved, for example, reselling M365, we see a much bigger opportunity at play where you are the person that is helping the customer get the visibility, figure out how to manage it, figure out how to secure it, and ultimately just really capitalize on this movement. So that's why we built Augmentt, and that's why the partnership with CloudRadial is such a healthy and productive one, because we're so aligned on our goals and objectives of giving you and your customer that visibility they need to make better decisions.
Thanks, Derik. So go back to, as we talk about like the state of SaaS security, which is pretty dismal in a lot of respects. One of the things, and I want to share with you my thought process early on, because there are solutions out there that sort of poke in this space, and one of which is most partners should be familiar with, is Cloud App Security in the Microsoft stack. And knowing that product's out there and it does some similar things to Augmentt, but the challenge with Cloud App Security, at least from our perspective, is the data is really not accessible, right? And so, and again, Microsoft does great if you're a single tenant environment. If you're a multi-tenant environment, Microsoft sometimes is really challenging to work with. And for MSPs, it's important to have information at scale that's multi-tenanted, right? And so when we looked at CloudRadial years ago, when we were putting that product and this concept together, the core piece was, again, we're the home where data lives and is presented to clients. It's again where MSPs work with their clients, and that needs data. And so if you think about the IT environment, if you've come from Windows Server 2012, if you've come from those environments in the past where everything was built around a Windows workstation and a local server, then the world is basically constrained around that environment, that on-prem, touchable, seeable environment. And then clearly what's happened, throughout this process, because again, that was a big enough challenge, and tools like Enable really did help make that stuff visible, transparent, and solvable. So as you go from Enable and you look at that, again, that physical world has been so well known. Once you get that under control, which is now pretty well under control or can be, the next big frontier really is the SaaS piece. And this is why we looked at it from day one with CloudRadial, is when a client thinks about IT, they don't think about the location of the data. They think about their screen and keyboard. And if it's on their screen and keyboard, it's part of their IT. And if that IT is a local Word application, that's fine. If that IT is a Salesforce application or a Zoom application in this case, then that's part of their IT too. So clients don't form a boundary of IT when it hits the walls of their office, right? And so SaaS for us has always been top of mind in what we need to deliver. And then if you look at SaaS today, Derik, you want to take some of the stuff you touched on a little bit, but talk about a little bit more about what you're seeing with the why SaaS and security is now becoming as big a threat to some clients as typical ransomware and other types of threats.
Yeah, Jeff, it's a great point. And Ali is always talking about the fact that SaaS is the new endpoint. And historically, most MSPs, didn't really get involved a whole lot when it came to software, right? It was all about the network. It was about the devices. It was about the infrastructure, the routers, servers, switches. But application was just something that, got installed either locally on a server, got configured, but there really wasn't a whole lot to it from an MSP's perspective. You fast forward to today, where now these applications reside outside of the firewall. They reside, out on the internet. The data is no longer centralized inside this great, secure perimeter that MSPs have built for their customers. Data is everywhere. It's easier than ever for any employee to sign up to whatever application they want. They don't even need a credit card most of the time. Everything's got a 15, 30-day trial. And what all of that has done is really added an incredible new layer of complexity to an already pretty sophisticated problem, in that it is all about that protection of the data, the users, and the applications. So when you start taking a look at this SaaS sprawl, what we're seeing most of the time is there's a real sort of democratization of where this data reside. You're getting employees signing up to all sorts of applications, using data from one app, exporting it, importing it into another application. And a lot of time, all of this is happening outside the purview of the MSP or the internal IT pro, right? The internal IT guy. And what we're seeing is a lot of the security attack, a lot of the vulnerabilities, a lot of that new layer of cybersecurity threat is not necessarily what's inside of the firewall, inside of the four walls of the building, but it is really sort of out there on the edge. It's really, those applications, that data that resides in those SaaS applications that may or may not be, in the purview of an MSP of their customers. So the way we look at it is as with all things, right? If you're an MSP and you take on a new customer, traditionally, the first thing you'll do is you'll do a network discovery. So it's all about, I need the visibility, right? There's no way I'm taking over anything before I know exactly what is happening. And when we started looking at SaaS, it was pretty obvious to us that there was really no easy way of being able to do that discovery. There was, other than asking like the finance people, like, what are we paying on our credit card? What are the applications we're paying for? Maybe doing some surveys of employee. What do you use daily? Are you using this? There really wasn't a whole lot of information as to how, and where those applications were. So it was obvious to us that being able to provide that visibility, what people would have traditionally called shadow IT, but being able to understand the scope of the usage is really the first part if you're trying to tackle security. And if you're bound by any type of regulatory compliance security framework, you know, one of the first policies you've got to look at is a vendor management policy, right? What I need a system of record of every application that we use and where is our data? Because without that, every other policy will fall apart. It's very hard to enforce a data breach policy or an acceptable use policy or even a data privacy policy if you don't know where your data is, if you don't know what the applications that are in use. And that's really sort of that tip of the iceberg. So with Discover, we make it nice and easy and very simple to identify those applications, truly help you and your customers understand what that landscape looks like. And again, with the relationship with CloudRadial, we make it fairly easy to be able to push the data into CloudRadial. So you're not having to jump between all of these various products. You love CloudRadial, you're in there day in and day out. Let's push the data so that you and your customer have that one view, that nice, simple environment where you can truly see what's happening. And again, from there, it's all about understanding how the applications are configured, understanding which users is using which applications. Are they approved? Are they restricted? Are they high risk? And ultimately, how do you make that entire SaaS environment a much more secure and a much more dependable component of the IT infrastructure, as opposed to just, I've got a marketing person and who knows what they're doing online. I think they're using MailChimp, but maybe not. And I think they're using this application, but who knows? And as we know, the problem is whoever signs up for the app usually is the administrator. Whoever is the administrator controls the security, controls the data. And as we've seen time and time again, you know, a marketing person, a salesperson, an operations person signs up to something, hosts data, they leave. You either had no idea that your data is there, but it's just, you know, out in the internet. So it's all about control. It's all about that posture.
Yeah, Ali, you know, maybe to help visualize some of this stuff, we need to show some stuff. But while you're teeing that up, and let's see, let me stop sharing, and maybe you should be able to share now. Hopefully that works. So, if one of the things that you touched on, and I think we can maybe address a little bit of this. But at the last conference, and again, it's all the trade shows now are about security. I mean, I don't know why they're just not all called security conferences, because this is a big problem out there. And it strikes me as interesting that, again, we hear a lot about things like Threat Locker or Auto Elevate that are there and designed to prevent actions before they happen, right? They're designed to be preemptive and protect clients from doing something or taking an action that would be inappropriate. But to your point, Derik, in that Auto Elevate, Threat Locker type class of product, when it comes to SaaS, if you want to just export the customer list and mail it off to wherever, that's easy, right? There's no Threat Locker to prevent that type of action. Unless you even know that, and especially if you don't even know that application is being used. So anyway, Ali, I'm fascinated by how lax the controls are in SaaS.
Well, that's what it is. We basically have like a binary decision today where either an app is okay or not. But then, of course, there are okay apps where people can do dangerous things in, like M365 or Dropbox or whatever, right? So just because something is an approved corporate app doesn't mean that any type of use of that app is okay. So just to show it, and I can jump back and forth between Augmentt and CloudRadial. So, you would do the setup in Augmentt, and you would do the deployment configuration via Augmentt, but this is essentially what your end customer is going to have access to. And it's going to be a list of all of the SaaS software applications that employees are accessing. Augmentt is going to give these default scores around, is it an approved app by default, unapproved, unknown, and waiting for MSP to confirm, or end user can let you know. We're going to pre-score them from a risk and a productivity level. So what is an app? Risk here being a type of app that would contain sensitive information, so a finance system, certain file sharing applications. versus a productivity? Is it actually a business application, or is it more social media, et cetera? And then you're going to see the total amount of activity in that. And the good thing about this is, I would say, just as a baseline, it's okay in your RMM to do a installed software audit. That just shows you what is actually installed on a machine. It doesn't tell you that it's ever been used, right? This is actual employee activity. So now we're getting an inventory of all the actual software applications that the business uses. And this tells me, are my employees using redundant applications? Do I see 5 different conferencing tools in there? Why would I have that kind of duplication and redundancy? I'm wasting money. Do I have, 4 different communication apps when I told everybody I want them to be using Teams? So why do I see Slack popping up in the marketing group? And why do I see sales using a different application over here? So I would say the baseline is kind of where it starts. It's good to have an inventory. Often your cybersecurity insurance underwriter is going to require that you provide an inventory of the actually used application. So that's a good baseline. But then you're starting to look for cost savings, any risky behavior, and things like that. And I would say, kind of as a baseline, if you think of this like a dartboard, the bullseye is the most expensive, the most risky applications, and then it kind of goes out from there. You don't need to be an expert in everything. Even your end customer is not an expert in everything. They're going to look at the list. They're immediately going to zoom in on Salesforce and Microsoft and QuickBooks and some of the higher ticket items. And they're going to say, why am I not getting enough usage out of this? Or why are we also using this other thing? And then people are going to start to do a bit of cleanup on that.
Now, one of the things I liked about, while you've got our screen up there, the one things that I really liked about the way you provided the data to us was not only do we get the list of applications, but if you click on LinkedIn, for example, I can see which users are in that LinkedIn application, right? So it goes back to the same thing we do in the software tab as well, which is, again, it's not about who has the software, it's about where that software is being applied. Yep. Right, and who has responsibility for it. And I know from working with or talking to partners who are talking to clients that have implemented Augmentt, I think there's always this moment of revelation in the client's mind when they can see, especially in SaaS, who's in LinkedIn, for example. Now, LinkedIn's a little more of a benign application, but there's a lot of social media apps. There's a lot of video apps and so forth out there that, again, when the client sees this data, it looks different than it looks to an MSP.
Oh, of course. And I would say that just in general, to let every MSP off the hook on this call, you do not need to be an expert in the 100 applications that every single one of your customers use. They, of course, have more context. They know who the department heads are. They know what, where most of the money is going. So it's less about the MSP having to figure out what the heck is Pocket and what should I do about it, right? It's not an MSP action. It's a service and a value that you're delivering to them, where for them, software was this siloed mess, a bit of a black box. They have no clue where their money's going and who's using what and where corporate data lives. And you're showing them and shining a bit of light on the situation. Then they might ask you, hey, can you help me out consolidating 3 apps to one? It might be migrating users or data off of an app to another app. And then that's where some of the services and other support revenues can come from.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has to be real clear, and again, it's clear to users that see this, but again, not necessarily the MSP, because MSPs see it through a different filter. When you look at that risk score as low, that's a risk score potentially related to breaches and data security and everything else. You talk about productivity. There's the productivity factor. The way you use it there is different than, again, I think the way that the clients see it, which is Facebook has a high productivity risk to it, because if people are using Facebook all day long, that's a threat to the office productivity, right? And so again, when we talk about risk and remediations, again, one of the things we're trying to accomplish with CloudRadial is that collaboration and mutual understanding, where a low risk to the MSP is potentially a high risk to the client, but you won't get there unless you make that transparent.
Yeah, and like I said, if I pop over to Augmentt for a second, there's a similar reporting, but again, if it's customer facing, we're typically going to live out of CloudRadial. But if I wanted to go into Augmentt and review what we call our SaaS app master list, and I wanted to find a particular app like Facebook, give it a different default scoring for my customers. And even if I wanted to have different exceptions so that by default globally it's this, but for different customers, I give her different scores. You can set up that kind of scoring and customize it to your heart's
that's
content.
very cool.
Our goal is just to kind of get you to hit the ground running, give you a bunch of defaults. But of course, your customer is going to come back and say, hey, actually, I'm cool with this app, just mark it approved. I don't need to know about it anymore.
Very nice. So Augmentt recently released, well, before we move on to that, we were talking about a little bit about shadow IT before, but, and again, we touch on this a little bit here, but you know, this also seems like, again, this is demo data, and it seems to me with 8 applications defined here, that's a really low number, right?
Yeah.
What's your typical, what are you finding across your partners with the number of applications that are surfaced up in the SaaS discovery?
Yeah, I would say, and it's funny, you know, with Augmentt, you're going to have those NFR licenses for internal use as well. So feel free to deploy it internally and see what's kind of going inside your own business. But often people would estimate, you know, somewhere around 20, maybe a little bit more. MSPs typically, I would say, use more tools, but it's usually 2 to 3x, whatever people expect. And it's because people forget about all those extra little support tools you use. Like you use some notepad taking tool and some other screenshotting tool, and like all these different little pieces of software that every person is using on a day-to-day basis. I would say marketing and sales are big offenders for going out and getting whatever flavor of the week support tool it might be for them. So it's not uncommon to see a small company of 20 people have 100 applications. Or to see a larger company, 200 employees, have, you know, 400-ish applications. So it's usually a surprise to anybody who looks at the data. And I've had MSPs swear up and down that nobody uses Dropbox internally, and they run an audit and they find out that half of their staff is using it. And again, it's, you know, people do whatever they need to do to get the job done. And that's what shadow IT is. It's not necessarily a malicious thing. It's just someone's like, it is faster for me to just use whatever tool I prefer than to use the sanctioned one over here that IT is managing.
Now, I'm assuming too, since you're working at the DNS level for most of this stuff, that if there was a browser plugin that was hitting other sites, because you mentioned the screen sharing and some other stuff, that again, browser extension, anything that's going through, it's not just really a full browser, it doesn't have to be in the browser window. It can be anything that's going through DNS, correct?
Yeah, so we support both DNS log collection and an agent running on each workstation. I would say 99% of MSPs are good enough with the agent. It's an easy deploy via RMM, but of course you can go the log scraping route. Log scraping is typically network level traffic. It doesn't usually resolve down to individual people. So if you want the individual people granularity, that's typically an agent. And soon we're going to be coming out with desktop application usage as well. So it would tell you the Microsoft 365 apps running on the desktop, Zoom, Slack, etc. So the data is always beefing up there. But yeah, I would say most commonly an agent, quick deploy, you know, continuous auditing, that route.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that came in on the chat related to the ways that we'll work together going down the road. And the fact that you're doing desktop apps, I mean, I think is an interesting, because we just had this conversation a week or so ago, talking about the ways that we can further, you know, enhance the transparency back and forth. One of the suggestions was being able to let clients maintain their own application list and set their own priorities on that, right? Which makes perfect sense. And some of that stuff, as we get this out there, what's fascinating with every other feature we've ever rolled out or any other integration, is it just begets more feedback, right? It begets more opportunities. And so, you know, as we go through this and we start seeing what we're working on together, there's other ways, again, like the desktop apps, is there a way that we can integrate our software inventory to align better with what you're seeing as well? Because the fact that we see the app doesn't mean anybody's using the app. If you see the app run, that's a different piece of data than the fact that the app exists on that workstation, which is what we do today. And the same thing with the Augmentt applications themselves. the next release, not the next release of the, but the next release of the Augmentt implementation, which will be later this quarter, early next quarter. What we want to be able to do is turn all this Augmentt data into policies that can be surfaced. So again, if there's Facebook, for example, is a banned application, then anytime it pops up in the Augmentt list, it should end up in the policy list inside of CloudRadial. So again, what's been fun working with Augmentt has been how receptive they are to working with us and bringing that data into CloudRadial. So I think some of the questions that have come up, the answers are basically yes, but we need insight, and so again, we've got the feature request to log those things in, or just send an idea to support, and then they'll take care of getting it logged for you. So, but again, let us know how we can make this integration better, because you've got two companies here that are very interested in making this work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Ali, go on, because you've got the Discover piece. Let's talk about, because again, one of the things that, again, there's more that Augmentt does other than what we show in CloudRadial, at least today. We're working on that too. But you've got the secure piece now, which is, I think, pretty interesting, because I've seen partners address this type of need a lot of different ways. We've got a little basic, we overlap here a little bit, but you guys are taking this concept of secure score and Microsoft reporting to another level. So show how that works as well, if you can, because this is where SaaS becomes really interesting to me.
And I mean, you started off by saying it, Jeff, that security is the word du jour, and it's kind of what's occupying customers' minds, MSPs' minds. So security is an area that we launched this in Q4 and plan to go a heck of a lot deeper, adding a ton more functionality. But I would say similar to Discover being that kind of global snapshot of here's what everybody's using, and then kind of continuously monitoring that to see if new apps are popping up. Secure is more about what are the risks in the Microsoft environment, what is the global configuration of important things like MFA, and just having an eye on that. So more of a MSP internal tool. We've been talking to Jeff about what of this data would be interesting to surface directly to end customers to do an automated security assessment, audits on some of the environment. The goal there being to push interesting data to the customer, not create more headaches where you expose us something where they complain and call you and are creating tickets for you, but what would be a good audit? So kind of have that in mind as you're seeing some of this, because we're definitely interested in feedback there. So the couple areas I'll focus on the most are this threat report. So this is actually a free feature in Augmentt and kind of free for life for MSPs. This is supposed to be a moneymaker. So you use this to assess or audit a prospect environment to convince them there's a problem so that they'll hire you as a security provider to solve some of these problems for them. So use it as a sales tool, no cost. And then the other two parts would be the licensed element of Augmentt. So if I take a look at the threat report, again, I can ping back and forth between any tenant, but let's take a look at this healthcare customer I have. There's 136 alerts that have popped up in their environment in the last 3 months. It's going to show you where they're coming from, what their security score is, what are the types of events and who they're affecting, categorization, high, medium, low. And we just keep going into, MFA risks, inactive account risks. So again, the goal here, I would say, and you're kind of crossing your fingers as you run this audit report, that the CEO or any business stakeholder that you're about to pitch to, that their email shows up as, sign-in risk from foreign nation X, or there was a brute force attack on their account. You want to show them that their security score is low, that very few people have MFA. And then you come in as the consultant to say, this is where you're at, this is where you want to be, and we're the guys to get you there. If I jump over to MFA, I would say just universally across the board, MFA is the thing that MSPs tell us is just challenging to get a view globally across your customer base. So you can come in here and just select all tenants, and now I'm seeing the MFA status globally across the board. Am I requiring it for my customer? So is it enforced? Is it enforced with a grace period or just not enforced at all? And then how many people actually have it on? So is it registered right now? And then I can just scroll through, scan my different customer environments. But of course, I can drill down into anybody, and that's where I would get their specific view, find all of the users that don't have MFA turned on. Now I can go do something about it. And we do have an Engage product that actually lets you manage users and groups and turn MFA on and off. But this is kind of the data audit element of it. And that's what we're kind of talking to Jeff about is, you know, what of this data is interesting to get end customer facing versus what would be good as an internal report for an MSP to have better visibility into their customer environment. Last thing I'll touch on, because MFA, I would say number one with a bullet. That's what every partner tells us they want visibility into and the problem they want to solve. I would say there's a handful of other security policies or security configuration items that you probably want to have turned on in your customer. Some of the ones I like to focus on is it's fairly easy to go disable legacy authentication methods, turn off some of the defaults for Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive sharing or guests or access. So again, specifying a default that, you know, users by default don't have these rights. The users that are customer facing and do need to be able to share files, they'll submit a ticket. We can go turn it on for their one profile, but let's have a zero trust or at least privileged access methodology here. And then finally, probably risky countries, right? So if I'm dealing with a small healthcare customer in an individual city, why would I have anybody in the world from anywhere can log into that customer's M365, right? Why wouldn't I go block 200 countries that could be a risky login source and just lock down that environment a little bit more? So for us,
I'm sorry, Alec, how does this relate to Secure Score? So, I mean,
I would say so a lot of these are some of the core elements, MFA being a huge one, defaults of sharing, et cetera, being a huge one. But we actually consciously decided that we weren't going to take every single item in the Microsoft Secure Score stack. We talked to a ton of partners about it, and unanimously partners said, I'm not going to do everything that Microsoft recommends. And I don't even want to show the detailed view that Microsoft gives because they'll just always make me look bad. So we cherry picked the 14 most important to our partners right now, and that's going to give you a good view of that. So you use the Secure Score as an audit to show the customer they're not doing great, because that's usually going to be a negative story, and you probably don't show it to them again after that. After that, you would make it to your custom kind of audit, you know, you sell a service that you're going to configure 4 things for them and maintain a security line of this, and then you just report on that to them.
Can you add or remove to those security checks, or is that fixed?
It's fixed right now, but we'll be letting you customize it to show, hide, narrow it down just to the 3 that you care about. And we're always coming out with more checks. So you'll see that list grow and grow. And then in the future, you'll be able to add a custom check if you want to execute an extra little piece of PowerShell or something to pull down a specific setting. But I would say right now, that's a fixed list. It keeps growing every single month. And pretty soon we'll be releasing a feature where you can just show and hide and clean up that list if you don't want everything in there.
Because we've had that same challenge. We have Secure Score in CloudRadial, but very few partners actually want to show a 67% compliance, right? So again, being able to create that custom security, basically create a custom security score that you could apply to all tenants that would be scalable, I could see as being very valuable. And letting partners control Microsoft best practices. Same thing they do with patch management, right?
Exactly. So that I would say that's 100% the goal there, Jeff, is to every MSP is going to have customers with different sets of requirements, and you want to match the security audit to the level of service. So if you're going to have your silver, gold, platinum customers, and you want to match the audit to that tier that the customer is on, and you want to report to them based on that. You don't want to give them away a bunch of information for free, and you never want to bring up the Secure Score or anything else that makes it look bad. So we're working on this summary report here. This is more of a QBR customer-facing report, and this is what I call the good news report, where you would want to show off that MFA is getting better over time. We're actually actively blocking a bunch of security threats and like intercepting logins from risky countries and things like that. And again, these are all of the configurations and the policies that MSPs should be deploying, blocking countries, blocking IPs, and turning on and off certain amounts of settings. But all of that, this is all the good news of things that have actively been blocked in the environment. Now, between all of us, this is what Microsoft is trying to do on a day-to-day basis anyways, is they're trying to, block logins and keep people safe. We just want to summarize it in a way that makes you look the best.
Right. And so again, and we're in discussions now to figure out like how to get that information into CloudRadial.
Yeah.
A couple of questions came up in related to secure. Are you going to support other platforms? But I really the only one I can think of off the bat is Google. Would you offer a secure score analysis for a G Suite or Google Workspace platform?
Yep. So we already support Google Workspace and Engage for user management, group management, et cetera. So we already have the API hooks, and the plan is to bring Google Workspace audits into secure as well. And then for me, next on the list would definitely be Salesforce. And that's because Salesforce has their Shield product and they have a pretty good API. But sky's the limit after that. There's a ton of apps that we're thinking of auditing. I generally think that MSPs mostly care about, what is the core productivity suite? It's Microsoft or Google. What are all of the file sharing applications? Because that's where 80% of corporate data lives. So Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, SharePoint, et cetera. And then after that, it starts to thin out where it's kind of like maybe Salesforce, maybe QuickBooks, maybe the HR system. But the goal is to kind of get that round security picture for all the most critical apps.
Yeah, the other question, just to elaborate here, in terms of, again, we talk about the Microsoft or Google, would you get down to specific applications like a Dropbox or a Box or something like that?
Yeah.
Say that again, sir.
Would you ever envision Augmentt actually going in and looking at specific applications to provide basically that same level of security determination at an application level, just like you're doing at the global
1,000%. Absolutely. So I think there's the base layer of identity and access management. So who has access to this software? And is MFA enabled, and what kind of permissions and governance do we have in place about who can access data? But then going a layer deeper into the product of, there's always defaults in every product. So I've seen Dropbox situations where IT admins have access, like internal IT, as MSPs are always dealing with internal IT admins messing stuff up. But I would say internal IT admins who are turning on settings where by default, all files are globally exposed to everybody, right? So it's kind of a free-for-all and problems like that. So there's definitely, it's all about access management, keeping the bad guys out, letting the good guys in, but kind of limiting what the good guys can see and do. So for sure with Dropbox, Box, and all the most common file sharing apps, and then definitely Microsoft and Google. And then, there's a bunch of sales and marketing ones and finance tools as well.
Yeah, so the same thing that I have to always go through with CloudRadial, which is today is just where we start, right?
Yeah,
it's certainly not where we're going to finish. So again, you're looking at something that's a work in progress, and sometimes even today with CloudRadial, even though I think we've reached a level of maturity, I still consider us as being extremely immature and still, 1,000 things more to add to the product. One of the things that another question that came up was related to, are we, I guess the way we work together, are you guys enhancing what we're doing or working standalone? And I think, and tell me if I'm misspeaking, but what we're trying to do with CloudRadial is take care of that presentation to clients, right? So again, the data that we show to clients, and Augmentt's not trying to create another client-facing portal. They're trying to basically get the data that they have that's interesting, that's client-ready, to CloudRadial so that we can get it in the appropriate bucket inside of CloudRadial and hide Augmentt. I mean, so again, Augmentt is an MSP tool. It's not a client tool. And we want to make sure that your clients always think first and foremost that the MSP is delivering this service, not Augmentt, right?
Yep.
And then the second piece is, is it standalone? I think it's always going to be standalone in the sense there's always a lot more data that an MSP is going to want to have that we're not going to surface up, right? So again, you can add more reports, more information to your dashboard faster than we can add them for the benefit of the MSP. So I think with all of our partners, there's a synergy when it comes to the client presentation side, but all of our partners will probably be standalone in some form or fashion because there's always just so much more to present.
Yeah, I definitely see CloudRadial as the customer-facing hub for all information, but then MSPs want their internal hub for all information, which is going to be the PSA or IT Glue or whatever your internal tool is where you store all of your knowledge and everything. So I want Augmentt to be kind of like, it solves that problem of integrating to all these SaaS apps up here, knowing the best practices, everything. But for customer-facing stuff, that's via CloudRadial, and for internal stuff, it's going to be via IT Glue, PSA, and everything else.
Right.
But like you said, MSPs don't need another portal. They need a tool that helps them be more efficient with data collection and centralizing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it goes back more and more. It's the idea of where you live to do your job, right? And so typically in the past, it's been the PSA, and then and by extension now IT Glue or a similar type of system like Hoodoo, where all of that documentation goes to be assimilated, right? So again, the IT Glue, Hoodoo, or the spillovers to work where the PSA doesn't cover that. And so again, I think the idea that you can live in your PSA or your documentation system or in CloudRadial, basically it really does help streamline and organize the whole understanding of what the complete problem is. So is there any last questions? Because we're just about out of time.
No, I know there's a lot of questions that have streamed through, and I would maybe ask that Jeff, you and I maybe in that link and take those offline, just start to make sure we answer everybody's, because I think there's some really good questions in that bunch.
Yeah, so the last question is just really, maybe this is a really quick one, but will Augmentt be implementing SSO?
Yeah, SSO is definitely on the short-term roadmap for federated login between your tools. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then some of the stuff, again, there's a lot of stuff here that's good ideas. The answer is it's not there today, but certainly, again, these are just great ideas and feedback for us to further work this partnership, and basically, again, to make sure that data is getting where it needs to get to as fresh and current as possible. So I appreciate everyone's attendance today. Let me go back, because there are a couple of very interesting links here. One is if you're an Augmentt customer and not on CloudRadial, there's a great opportunity to get started with CloudRadial at reduced price, which is great. So again, if you're already using Augmentt and just want to see a better way to get that data to clients, this is a great opportunity to go take advantage of that. And what I really appreciate, because Augmentt did this specifically for CloudRadial users, is a free 100-seat license of Augmentt. So if you're just, for the Discover product at least, so if you're just even trying to dip your toe in the SaaS world, this 100-seat license that's free is just a no-brainer, right? It's easy to implement, it's easy to get set up, it's easy to connect our systems, and then you can start providing SaaS data to a selected client or selected group of clients just to see for yourself how powerful that reporting is. Again, we've been doing this now. Again, we started this, I think, November. We rolled it out at IT Nation last year. So it's only been a couple of months, but we've already got some really, really positive feedback. Again, once you get it connected, within a day, you'll be connected. It's normally just a process flow, but it's 15 minutes of your time, probably what you need to do to get going, but it's a very powerful tool. And again, if you want more information on Augmentt, if you want to do the demo, or you want a demo of CloudRadial, certainly some easy ways to get going, and we'd love to hear from you. So Again, we've got some good feedback from this webinar. I do appreciate it. Appreciate everybody's time today. And Derik, Ali, and George, who you didn't get to see, but is quite handsome. We all appreciate you being here and helping us out today. All right, so thanks very much. And we'll look forward to hearing from everybody. Take care.
Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.